Welcome back to the Rhody Rumble. Montana Friselli. Special guest today, Stone Freeman. What's up, baby?
Hey, what's up, dude?
How you been?
Doing all right. I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me today.
Today's a special episode, and Stone kind of has a portrait of him in the background right there. It's about Coach Keaney, Frank Keaney. What we think of here at URI, the creator of Rhode Island Athletics almost, and a guy that brought change to the University of Rhode Island, but it went farther than that. It went more through the entire athletic community, and especially the basketball community in the United States, and the evolution of the fast break offense, and putting the meaning of turning your defense into offense, and he was truly the creator of it. And we'll start with, who was he? I mean, Frank Keaney, guy born in the 1880s that went to Bates College, football, basketball, baseball guy, and slowly moved on to coached at Woonsocket High School, and then moved on down here to the University of Rhode Island, where he was in his time here in Kingston. So from 1920 until 56, I believe 56, he was a basketball coach, baseball coach, football coach, an athletics administrator. He was a track coach, a cross country coach, taught chemistry, taught Greek, taught Latin. He was truly the jack of all trades.
Yeah, he was. I'm sorry, I was completely zoned out there. But yeah, no, I mean, Coach Keaney is to the University of Rhode Island, one of its most historical figures, and for the reasons that you're mentioning, Montana. I mean, it wasn't just athletics, which I think he's become obviously and understandably so synonymous with, but it was his chemistry connection. It was his family's connection, right? Having two sons that were athletes here, having a wife that essentially was the pioneer of women's athletics on campus. He was everything that I think we're remembering him for and more. And of course, like I said, we remember him for his athletic accomplishments here on campus, hence Keaney Gym, hence, NIT finals in the 40s and things of that nature, the things that kind of stand out that are easy to remember. Keaney blue, right, the color, but more often than not, I think people are also forgetting, his contributions to the sport of basketball, which is another thing you're kind of alluding to. But yeah, when he was on campus, his time on campus was pivotal. And you look at the world, I'm not foolish. I'm definitely biased towards Keaney and his accomplishments, but I'm not foolish. It was a different time. It was a different era, but there's no sense of hiding it. During his time and era, the University of Rhode Island was, one of the, if not the premier sports schools in New England, right? And if you look back, I always find, for example, when we play Providence this weekend in men's basketball, there's always, URI, PC, Brown, UConn. Those are Rhode Island's longest served, quote unquote rivals. And we haven't played UConn in a regular season basketball game in like 20 years now. Providence, we do play every year, but it's just a once a year thing. Brown, we play maybe once every 2 years. It usually averages out a trip here for the Bears once a year. But long story long of it, to wrap it all up, during the height, we have now accumulated so many contests against these schools, because at one point, Rhode Island versus Connecticut, especially with Keaney at the helm, was one of the best college basketball games in the region, if not the country. So it's just interesting to think about, how much time has changed, but we can't look away or shy away from the fact that while Frank Keaney was here, Rhode Island was definitely in that category of being hunted. They weren't the hunters. They were a team that people circled on their schedules.
100%, and it was extremely even match throughout at the time. That was a time in our country where athletic departments were not funded by millions and millions of dollars. That was not yet a thing. So it was a lot of even tree when it came to where you were playing, how you got there. Everybody took a bus there. Everybody took a train. Nobody was flying on planes. There was no next level accommodations for teams. And I feel like that kind of helped out with how even the rivalries did match up. And there was a lot of passion within the school. And I think that Coach Keaney really brought that to Rhode Island. And, we talk about Dale Brown, who's someone that me and Stone, were able to meet with a couple of times. And he was, probably one of the longest, or still is the longest, supporter of Rhode Island athletics. He's nearing 90 years in age. And, he told us the story of when he was just a little kid here in South Kingstown. And, he would ride his bike from town all the way into Kingston and break into Rodman Hall. And, he would sit there and, be putting up shots, and Coach Keaney would come out of his office and, instead of, kicking the little kids out, he would always be there, help them out, shoot around with them, or, you know what I mean? They'd be able to sit there and watch practice. But it was funny when it came to the games, and it came to games in Rodman Hall, what exactly happened was the kids would go, and Dale Brown included, they would break in through a window on the bottom of the locker room, and they would climb all the way up the stairs, and they would watch through the door windows, or they would go up to the top and look over the balcony, which was, almost, if you thought about a track around a basketball court, but elevated, and people would sit all around the balcony, sitting, legs hanging. And, that was the only way to really watch. And, he said that there was an administrator in the athletic department that would basically watch out for them. And, if he ever saw them, he had to kick them out, and kind of had it out for the kids. But I thought it was really interesting to see that these kids, loved Rhode Island athletics so much. And growing up here at URI, I was around for the Jim Barron era. And when I was in elementary school, middle school, that was the era of basketball here. And I fell in love with it. I went to every single game possible because those were my idols. And being, a local schoolboy, they would come to the elementary schools and always hang out and, read and do different activities with us. And it made me feel the same connection to Dale, and that drive and that passion to be there, especially as a young kid. And, all that Coach Keaney did for that community at the time. And it carried on to another story that I wanted to touch on. And I forgot who, I believe that me and you were there together, but it was he was a student reporter at the time, and he went up to Coach Keaney just to ask him a couple questions. He ended up calling up Winifred, who's Keaney's wife, and said, "We have a guest for dinner." And he ended up going with Keaney back to his house, eating dinner, and then got to stay until, basically what was bedtime then, 9, 10 o'clock, and, got to get all this information for, what was the article in the Good 5 Cent Cigar, which is so interesting to me.
Yeah, that again is kind of touching on where he transcends just a coach. And again, different time, different era, but campus was always, if you look at how big the University of Rhode Island is right now, picture that, but with less buildings, right? So Keaney's living along Route 138 essentially. His office and everything is either at one of two places at the time: Davis Hall on the quad, or Rodman Hall, which is a little bit a ways away from the quad. But if you look at the geography of campus, that's a pretty large area to cover. There's no library there, right? So you're looking Rodman, and then about 100 yards, 200 yards out is the quad. Ranger Hall's there where Keaney was a chemist. These are all things that then, going back to your story about taking the student home for dinner, you're starting to see that this campus was his, and I can picture him kind of, the way that I would think about it is probably walking across campus with this guy and being like, "Hey, we got way too much to talk about, come back home for dinner." And again, that's kind of how at least he's remembered in the stories that we hear now. So that's right up there with who he was as an individual, and also to a certain degree who he was as a coach too, because he was more personable than he was anything. I think Ernie Cabriolet said, in terms of gameplay, he's not sure he learned anything from Coach Keaney, but in terms of being, getting his team prepared and ready to mentally play a game, Frank Keaney was the best. So he was a really personable person, and that's another story that just kind of feeds into it.
No, and we think about, he was almost a father figure to many of the people on campus, if not all of the people on campus. People called him the mentee, in the sense of the mentor. and, basically mentored everybody on the campus. And, with his athletes and especially his basketball players, football players, baseball players, many of them were the same people, you know what I mean, that went from season to season to season. And, Coach Keaney, became dad to them. They're away from home. They're at college. They're living on campus. Coach Keaney's house is on campus. At one time, both of his sons were on the team, and they were able to, all mash together. And I think about this, the movie Basket Wizards that came out during wartime, and it was to help show the soldiers overseas what was going on here. And University of Rhode Island basketball was, at what we would say a peak of the time, and it showed Coach Keaney coaching, and their practices from that film alone were so intense in the sense that it was a consistent moving around, consistency of learning and repetition, which is so important in sports. And you cannot do things enough, especially when it comes to basketball. I feel like throwing passes, shooting the ball, and this is a time of no 3-point line. So their emphasis is, why are we shooting from so far away when we can be shooting closer? And it's all counting for the same amount of points. So this is where we get into the fast break, which is what Keaney is most known for, and it's something that has really revolutionized the game and really changed the way that we think about basketball.
Yeah, I mean, the fast break offense changes everything. Horse race basketball at the time is what it was called, and being able to average over a point per minute was unheard of. Rams did it first. Being able to average over 2 points a minute, unheard of. Rams did it first. So these are again kind of keynotes to the life that Frank Keaney inevitably lives, but also is a reason why he's a basketball Hall of Famer. And I've always thought, when I look around campus here, I'm not a big statue guy, and that's not because I don't believe people deserve statues. I just think that, like, if you're going to get a statue made for you, like, you got to reach a certain limit. So I'm never even advocating for a statue. Keaney, my thing though is like a banner, because he's the only really Rhode Island affiliated person to be in the Basketball Hall of Fame. And it's not, the College Basketball Hall of Fame or, New England Basketball Hall of Fame. Like, if you go to the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts, Frank Keaney is in that. If you've ever been there, it's a big dome when you finally get into, the real Hall of Fame side, and all the photos are in the dome, and Keaney's up there. So, I think that's these accolades that we talk about, these different things that he did to transform the sport of basketball to what he did here at the University of Rhode Island is really remarkable. And 401 career victories. I mean, that's something that I remember when Dan Hurley was here on campus, and inevitably was, again, different time and age. So I'm sure people can nitpick this argument, but everybody would say, he's the best coach to come to Kingston. And I was always quick to say, well, he's the best coach to come to Kingston that's not named Frank Keaney, because the longevity of Keaney's stay here, the way, and again, different time and age, but the way that the team was New England's team to a certain extent. I mean, there are stories of when he would go into Boston with his sons because they were big hockey fans to see the Bruins. People noticed Frank Keaney. It was a thing. The Boston Globe reporting, Frank Keaney's coming to the city today, right? Like,
Yeah.
People cared about him enough, and were interested in what he was doing enough that he definitely became, celebrity, maybe not so much, but definitely became a figure in college basketball and the basketball landscape in New England and the Northeast.
And we touch again on Coach Keaney in Boston. I think it's very funny in the book. Keaney, if you don't love to play, pivot and go home. Bill Woodward. Very interesting story in there when they would go to Boston. The boys would go off on their own and do their own thing. And Coach Keaney and his wife would like to go to knickknack shops.
Yep.
They're big collectors of China, and they would like to go to used sporting goods stores. And Coach Keaney would then go to find uniforms for his team to wear that year. And I think about how low budget, in a sense, that, and it also has to do with resources and what was available to you. And at the time, Kingston is far away from places, so when you have the chance to go to Boston at that time, you have to make the most of your experience and, getting things for your teams. And being the man of the athletic department, that's what was most important for him. And, also spending time with, obviously his kids, his wife. And it was really just an amazing thing to see. Coach Keaney was, known outside of this area. And it really shows about, his longevity in the sense of what he was doing at the time. And it lasted for a while. When you're at a place for, 33 years almost. So it's really interesting to see. And back to the basketball side of it, what he was doing on the court. And I want to explain this. Coach Keaney, or at the time, we'll talk about basketball. Up until the late 1920s, basketball, there was a tip-off rule. I like 1930s. There's the tip-off rule. And after every basket, there was another tip-off. So the Rams were able to keep possession multiple times in a row. That changed, though, in 1937 when it went to, once a team scores, it goes to the other team. And this is where we came to full court defense, playing a full court zone or a full court man, and Keaney would play both of them. And, his whole theory behind it was disrupting people in the front court and then being able to put pressure in the back end of the basketball court would force bad passing, force a while for them, tire out the offense, not, make them work to get open, hopefully a steal, and then a pass in a high percentage shot. Coach Keaney never wanted to settle for a low percentage shot because he thought it was useless. If you were shooting a ball so far, 20 feet away from the basket, it's the same exact thing. Shooting the ball 2 feet away from the basket, it's 2 points. And he made a huge emphasis, and this is how, you go from a 1 point per minute team to a 2 point per minute team, is your defense is so aggressive, and being able to instruct throwing an overhead pass or a long pass. Coach Keaney, it showed in Basket Wizards, the one-handed pass where he's showing it's almost a baseball motion of throwing the ball. And I think that's really interesting, the coaching aspect, the technicality aspect of the game at the time, and what he was able to do, and especially with amazing players. He had his son on the team, Warner Keaney, and Warner at the time was 6'4", 270 pounds.
Yeah.
And he was really nobody else was like him. If you want to talk a little bit about Warner and his size and his stature.
Yeah, he was a specimen, and I've always thought it was fun. When you go into the Ryan Center in the Hall of Fame, there's Warner Keaney's, and you can see how big of a human being he was. But he was an athlete, very similar to his dad, right? His dad certainly was not the slenderest of men. He was a bigger dude, but he was an athlete. He was a mastermind, and that's the same thing goes for his son Warner, who I believe Montana ended up becoming a pretty good head coach down in your neck of the woods here in Rhode Island.
Yes,
so there's again another connection kind of to this community. But the way that you're describing, how Coach Keaney played, instructed his teams is exactly, I shouldn't say exactly, but there are shades of how really good college basketball teams operate nowadays, right? If you look here on campus, we've seen some really good defensive teams over the last 5, 6, 7 years that are the reasons why there's a couple NCAA tournament teams. Same thing goes for at the national stage, though. Some of the bigger time ACC schools and whatnot, they're you look at coaches like Tony Bennett and coaches like Leonard Hamilton and Mike Krzyzewski. Defense is a namesake, right? They got offense, they got the star power now. That's a sign of the change in the times, right? You can get away with, allowing a team to score 75 points as long as you score 76, but defense is still there. And I think Keaney was the same thing. Keaney put an emphasis on defense, but he was still okay with, what was it? We'll let you score 100 points as long as we score 101, or we'll let you score 99 as long as we score 100. There's some, traits in there that we start to see formulated in Keaney's time in Kingston that now have, it's not transforming basketball. It is what the standard has become in basketball, which is pace, which is defense, which is high scoring. And you want to talk about ahead of your time. Keaney was ahead of his time by 80 to 100 years, which is really good to think about.
And, there's a really funny story that I'd like you all again to touch on. And this is the main story, and I'll lay the backdrop for it.
Sure.
And, you can give the context. They're playing Maine,
Yep.
and most of the players foul out, and they're down to four guys left on the roster eligible to play. Coach Keaney goes, and what does he do next? He picks up a what? A
A
chair.
chair. Yep.
And
Yeah. That.
Coach Keaney goes and puts the chair in the game. And if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, that again is kind of where we keep talking about this. This, of course, is a different time and era in basketball. But you look at, the perspective of what's going on. First of all, it's probably at Rodman Hall, right? And Rodman Hall was as a dangerous of a place for an opposing team to come into as there ever has been in college basketball. And yes, you don't have to take it from me, the kid that, gets a tanning booth size office here in Keaney, Jim, but take it from, everybody recognizes Joe Paterno's name, who's the, head coach at Penn State forever in basketball. When he was at Brown University, he was on the basketball team and had to make trips to to Rodman Hall to take on some of, Keaney's teams. And he called it a snake pit. I mean, nobody wanted to go into Rodman Hall. So now you got, first of all, the atmosphere is dangerous for an opposing team. Second of all, there is a different flair back in the 30s and 40s when Keaney's here in Kingston, and a different feel to the word Rhode Island across your chest. And maybe, again, different time in age, maybe not physically across your chest, but playing Rhode Island was a different vibe. Travel was a lot different, Montana, like you're talking about, right? So even if you're coming from Brown University, you're probably taking, a school bus, right? And highway systems are not the same, and so on and so forth. So you have all this coming in, and then on top of it, you think you caught a break because the other team's, foul trouble, et cetera, injuries, whatever. And Keaney just continues to play his mind games where pretty much says, I don't care, we got to win this game, and puts a chair on the court. I mean, it is a completely different time in basketball, but again, it's kind of, that is a microcosm for what we're talking about here, right? He was a unique individual. He was a really good basketball mind. And on top of it, he was himself. He had no problem with putting a chair out there and being like, yeah, deal with it. That's what we're going to have to do right now. So that's a really good example of the type of person that Coach Keaney was.
Exactly. And, he was truly a character, and he was his own character. And I think that's what is most important when you think about, his style was always similar. It was rare to see him in a suit except for on game day. You always saw him in, high water sweatpants, a shirt that, barely touched the top of his pants, usually stained with ice cream or some sort of food. His hair was always messy. If it was football season, he was always in, high water sweats again and a sweatshirt. And he didn't really care. He was that guy. That was him. He showed up to class right after practice would be, and he would say, "What's up, guys? Let's get to work." And, he'd start talking in Latin, and you'd be like, how is this guy who was just at football practice, just at basketball practice, now here, talking to us in Latin or speaking chemistry with us? And I just think it's so important, that education piece. And, a big topic right now is the word student athlete, which came along in the 1950s and is starting to phase out now, with what exactly is going on with the name, image, and likeness stuff. But Coach Keaney truly exemplified. I think if there was a student athlete, Coach Keaney really exemplified that in the form of a mentor or a coach, because he did do the academic side and he did the athletic side. And there's only one person that I know right now that does both. That's Mike Leach at Mississippi State, formerly at Washington State, where he was not only teaching a class, but also being their head football coach. And, something that's, fairly unheard of in, the 2010s. And that's what he was doing. And I just think that was so interesting, to see. And it made me think a lot about Coach Keaney at the time, who was, teaching courses and coaching. And I think that had to do a lot about what his players felt when they were on the court. They were always with an educator. Coach Keaney's main emphasis was teaching, and he's a teacher at heart. And I was watching, actually, this morning when I was eating my breakfast, the Nick Saban, Bill Belichick documentary on HBO. And, it says we're teachers at heart. And that's why we do it. And I think that that is so true, because every coach out there, you don't get in because, you don't get into it because you love, so much the game, but you love the kids and you love the kids being around the game. And that's the way to do it. You have to love instructing and teaching and helping kids succeed. And I think about my coach, my offensive line coach, Steph Wheeler, and he loves football, but what I think he loves more is watching us play football and watching us succeed, and helping us through our failures. And, I think that's just so important. And, we think about Coach Keaney. Coach Keaney's made it to Madison Square Garden multiple times, and, has came up short, and especially against Adolph Rupp at Kentucky. And if you want to talk a little bit about that whole situation that went down at the Garden.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in the 1940s, the NIT, again, a different time and age. I keep emphasizing this because there's a lot of people that are quick to judge the NIT in this day and age, and say what you want. It's still a postseason tournament that, if it's not for the formation of the NCAA, which inevitably is important to, college athletics, but without that creation, the NIT is the National Invitational Tournament, right? And then you get an invitation to play in this tournament, because at the time, this is what your goal is. Your goal is to get invited to this tournament that inevitably you can fight to be the top team in the country. And and by we, I can say that as Rhode Islanders, we lost to Kentucky in the national championship game by a point. And I think it was 44. So what that says about the university is that, again, if we told you now, right, that even the NCAA tournament aside, even if it was still the NIT, if this year I told you URI would lose in the NIT final, there would still be a lot of people that they might not be ecstatic, right, because the NCAA tournament has taken the premier spot, but you'd still be like, wow, they made it to the final two of the NIT. Like that's a pretty successful year. That means it comes with 25 wins and some national TV games. You get to play at Madison Square Garden, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, at one point it was Rhode Island versus Kentucky. Kentucky is everything that it is now, it maybe even more back then. A bluegrass type of blue blood team. Duke wasn't what it is. So at the time, it's like North Carolina, Kentucky, and John Wooden at UCLA. And that's about it in college basketball. Kansas too, for that matter. I should throw Kansas into that loop. These traditional blue bloods. And Rhode Island finds himself at the center of the college basketball universe. And to lose by a point, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to sit here and tell you if you win that game, Rhode Island's in the ACC. No, that's not what I'm alluding to. What I'm saying though is to be in that breath, and mind you too, people gravitated, right? I mean, there's a reason why the Kingston train station, is still where it is today. And exactly. I think we've drifted away from using trains, right? The airport has become the main thing, but I mean, Kingston was a frequent stop or a frequent place for students to get on and head south into New York City to see Rhode Island in a game like that. I mean, I know that President Woodward at the time had given the university the day off, right? Because he anticipated almost the entirety of campus wanting to be at Madison Square Garden. So we're not having class today. And inevitably the Wildcats win it. But I told this story a couple times before. When I first started looking into Keaney and found myself in the archive closet in the library, I'd sat down and pretty much just cleared my morning. I was a junior at the time, and I was like, I just want to look through all these things. And my dude Mark up there hooked me up with a ton of good stuff. So I'm sifting through, and there was the letter from Adolph Rupp that essentially says to Keaney and to President Woodward at the time, inevitably we won, right? I wish it could have gone your way, but we were on the winning end. But the amount of support and the amount of pride that the University of Rhode Island should have in their men's basketball program is inevitable. And I mean, there's only one of maybe four names that again, over time they start to fade into history, right? And probably for Adolph Rupp's sake, it's better that way, because I know he definitely has a checkered past. But at the time, though, that is the biggest name in college basketball. So to say, hey, what a game. That's what makes college basketball great. You guys should be proud. that's not a slap in the face. That's not, trying to one up you. That is as authentic as it can get. Very similar to if when Florida Gulf Coast went on that run to the Sweet 16, you have a lot of coaches at the time just going, you know, tip of the cap. It sucks that we lost. Georgetown, I'm sure their fans are still pissed about that, losing to FGCU and the first round near a 2 seed, or UMBC taking down Virginia a couple of years ago. I don't think it's that much of a caliber. I think it's probably the equivalent of a 12 beating a 5, right, in this day and age. But you have these moments in sports where you can go, yeah, you tip your cap and you go, listen, whether we win or we lose, that is what makes the sport great. And that's what happened to Frank Keaney and his Rams in the 40s.
Exactly. And, we think about now, and we fast forward years later, we're nearing 100 years. I mean, we're 1 year over the 100 years of Coach Keaney coming to Kingston and starting the kingdom, starting to build the kingdom here in Kingston. And, what do we do to bring back, and we can say relevance, but I more want to feel the pride.
Yeah.
And how, it's really the connection, as a student, if you go across campus and you show a picture of Coach Keaney and you say, who is Frank Keaney? I wonder how many people know actually who he is.
No, and I think you're right. But I would also say that in this day and age, if you went across North Carolina's campus and had a cardboard cutout of Dean Smith, how many, freshmen in Chapel Hill are going to know who Dean Smith is? The diehards are always going to know, right? And that's what my thing has always been. It's not a matter of trying to get everybody on campus to remember Frank Keaney. And that's why I brought up the statue. No. I'm not even arguing to make a statue of the guy. What I'm arguing is that over time, there are certain points that make any college institution important. But for a place like Rhode Island, which is small both physically and metaphorically, right? We're a small state, metaphorically small too, in terms of, everybody says 7 degrees of separation. In Rhode Island, it ain't that way. At the University of Rhode Island, it ain't that way. Everybody knows everybody, even though we have like 16,000 undergrads here. What it comes down to is using our history to propel us forward into the present. And that's where Keaney Gym is a huge part of this. Again, it's become the home of just volleyball now, and men's and women's basketball inside the Ryan Center, which again, thanks to the times that has to happen. I'm not part of the crowd that says we should have never left Keaney. No. After you make an Elite 8 run and donorship is up and you have the chance to build something like the Ryan Center, you do it. Yeah. But you have to be able to reflect back on what got you there. And inevitably it's Keaney Gym was a dangerous place to play too. Nobody likes coming into Keaney Gym. In the old days of the early onset of the A10, when Temple is one of the number 1 teams in the country, literally consistently, and they got to make trips to Kingston. I mean, I'm sure that Keaney Gym became a very dangerous place to play.
Mm-hmm. And it's we go back, we listened to Kenny Green, who was one of the all-time leading rebounders here at Rhode Island. Played here throughout the 80s, I believe, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Kenny Green, said it's a dump, but it's our dump, and we want to defend it. And he really took that to heart. And many of the people that talk about Keaney Gym, feel the same way. Shane Donaldson, who is the head SID here at URI, he said when you left Keaney Gym, you were mentally and physically exhausted, because that's what it was supposed to feel like to be a college basketball fan and be an active fan. Keaney Gym, that feeling and those stories, they bring, almost, they make the hair on the back of my neck stick up, and it, you walk by now what is, an empty gym. But, I think you said it best, if these walls could talk, what would they say? And that's truly what we want to know. And we'll go to the last game in Keaney Gym versus St. Bonaventure, and a packed house with alumni there. The entire campus is there. It's rocking and rolling. It was on ESPN, and you have Rhode Island and St. Bonaventure, 2 A10 foes, with Jim Barron, who's the head coach of the Rams at the time, St. Bonaventure guy. And I just think that, that's where college basketball is made right there, and, continuing time. But it all started, Keaney Gym, Rodman Hall, and before that, even Lippett Hall. And it's funny how you build up over time. You get the Ryan Center built, and then you have, the passing of a ball. You go, Lippett Hall down to Rodman, and, you go from Rodman to Keaney, and then from Keaney, you pass it over to the Ryan Center. And it really shows the tale of time. And it's so important to the university, I feel like, to keep that alive. And let's talk a little bit more about, what do you think, if I were to ask you, what do you think would be a really, interesting and awesomely perceptive way that the university could continue to honor basketball over the years here in Kingston?
Yeah, I think the first part that I just want to touch upon is, I'm sure, not in a podcast form, of course, but I'm sure there were two people that, loved the day and age of Rodman Hall. And when they built Keaney, we're just going, man, look what we're going to miss here. It's the same thing that people argue. Some people would argue when they made the Ryan Center, right? Well, look, we get this beautiful thing, but we're going to miss those days. Again, that's the sign of the changing times. I think the best way to remember this, era of basketball that got us to where we are is the little things. I got this guy over my shoulder here. This was when we couldn't have fans in the Ryan Center. The marketing team here did a good job of putting out those cardboard cutouts, and Keaney's included. I think it's something as simple as those little things. You look at the top of campus, and on the light posts, there are different student athletes and whatnot. I think EC Matthews might be up there, and there's different students on campus in general that are in the workforce and stuff like that now. Those are great, right? My suggestion would be, if we get the history involved a little bit more, right? What do those flagpoles look like if we did like a history of URI? I mean, we had our 125th anniversary a couple of years ago, and there was some history involved as well. But again, I don't want to look too far in advance, but the more that we look forward, it gives us an opportunity to reflect backward and to include Coach Keaney, to include the athletic department in those conversations. I mean, listen, Fine Arts Center, the engineering department, the nursing school, all this stuff is critically important to the history of the University of Rhode Island. I just think that athletics has a unique space because people feel more attached when they see Rhode Island in the Sweet 16, right? When they see Rhode Island in back-to-back NCAA tournaments, it's no disrespect to I think we just had a Tony Award winner student here that won a Tony,
South
right?
Kingstown guy, may I add?
Yeah, and people again feel the pride in that moment, but for some reason, sport is just different. Sport is just different. We can claim that as our own. That's important. Matt Franco, when he won America's Got Talent, I mean, everybody loves that. He comes back to campus, he's doing magic tricks on the quad. Like, people love that. But there's something different about seeing the Ryan Center filled on, a Friday night for URI versus Dayton to start off the A10 season. Like, there's something different about sports on a college campus, never mind the University of Rhode Island. So my thing would just be to keep athletics at the center of those conversations, to keep athletics there, to remember what happened before, and let us use it as an opportunity to bring these athletic programs and this athletic department to the next standard. Because I really think standards have changed around here, right? I think people are accustomed to winning now, which is a really good feeling to have, right? I mean, we're 7-3 right now in men's basketball, and I read Twitter and people are pissed. I don't get it, but that's the standard has changed. Let's reflect back on our past and see how we can move forward and create some longevity out of this.
Definitely does. And the expectation to win.
Yeah.
And, you really have to, once you climb the mountain, so to speak, I'll use it in Bill Belichick terms here. It's because I watched them. Climb up the side of the mountain, and you get to the top of the mountain. Now you're being hunted. So you have to be the mountain. And the challenge is to be the mountain in the sense of make it the expectation that you are rock solid, you are a winner, you are, you might fracture, but you don't break.
Good point.
And that's, being part of the football team here at URI, that's something that I know that we're trying to build and bring back, what was, bring back a pride of the fall the university. I mean, it's been a long time since we've had consistency in winning here. And I think that that's one really good thing is that, now we're continuing to learn how to win games. And, I say that across, all of our teams here in Kingston. And, to have a amazing athletic department, that backs us and backs what URI Athletics stands for and what we are as a whole is, extremely important. And, and guys like me or, I'm the Keaney guy on the team, Coach Murph calls me the librarian. And, it's really just because, it's guys like Frank Keaney that really inspire me and bring me to the forefront of what URI Athletics is and what I want it to be. That's pride.
Love that, man. Love that. It starts with having these conversations and keeping the conversation going. So credit to you, my man. I appreciate you and your goals and ambitions, and also your love for the University of Rhode Island. I know it's a really powerful thing, in particular when you have Rhode Island literally straight across your shirt on Saturdays in the fall. That's an important side to this for sure.
Well, let me just remind you that when I was just a ye old pipsqueak, the age of 16 or 17, whatever I think it was like 16, I met this dude named Stone Freeman, who's sitting in front of me right now through Zoom. And Stone and I started to bond, I feel like, over Rhode Island.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
That's where it started. And, I remember countless nights, sitting in the union with you and just looking at, random Keaney stuff. And it really, that's what really sparked my interest. And, I don't know what sparked yours. If you want to tell a little bit about what it was.
What sparked mine was, I think, kind of, my answer to that last question, which was, what do we do now, was that I had felt, in particular as a sophomore and a junior here, that there was so much that we were missing. And it was largely the men's basketball and football programs at the time, because I really bought into Coach Fleming and the football team. I thought there was some stock that should be bought there. And then I thought, men's basketball inevitably was right there. And we finally did get over the cusp and made it to the NCAA tournament. But I remember thinking, I was like, there's so much more. And I start diving into record books and talking to people and realizing that, because I'm a Rhode Islander myself, there's a lot more here than I think people think. And that's no fault of their own. I think you got to unpack it a little bit more. And if I can be the guy that unpacks it, I was always, as humble as possible, but that always made me feel like you're kind of the guy when you can have that thing that gives somebody a sense of pride, right? Because you took the time to tell somebody about Coach Keaney, or to tell somebody about the last time a women's basketball player did this, or the last time the track and field program did that. And that's where I started to get even more specific and dive into different things. And then journalism certainly helped me too, being with the cigar and talking to these coaches on an everyday basis and getting more involved is where this just starts to blossom. But I think the interest really starts with getting on campus, as a sophomore in particular, because my freshman year was just that adjustment year, like it is for a lot of people. But diving in as a sophomore and being like, aha, like let's figure out more. Let's unpack this a little bit more. And it has led me down this crazy road that now I literally can't, for a while it was always, there's so many things that become synonymous with you, and the University of Rhode Island is me now. Forget synonymous. Like this is exactly what I want to be doing. Why I want to be doing it will just continue to help me do it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, Stone, thank you so much for joining me today. As always, a pleasure. I tend to see you a couple times a week, so.
Yeah, we see each other often, but anytime, this is always fun. So thank you for having me, Montana. I appreciate it.
As always, Rhody Rumble, Stone Freeman, little Keaney special for you. Thank you all for watching.
Price I want for sure, you gon' need 3 promoters. I got the body from Jim Ellis, but I had switched the motor. I got these badass bitch running around this bitch named all the coders. I just told her make a story. I just bought all the Trojans.